Racist cops laughed at her tattoo. They pointed, sneered, called it gang ink. In a small southern town where power wears a badge and prejudice hides behind the law, she was just another target, until everything changed. They mocked what they didn't understand, and touched what they never should have. But when one man in uniform walked through the door and saluted her without a word, the laughter died instantly. Because in that moment, everyone realized they hadn't just messed with the wrong woman. They'd ignited something far bigger than they could ever imagine. What secret was she carrying? Every story brings us a little closer together. Before we dive in, drop a comment with where you're tuning in from. It's a joy to see how far this family of listeners reaches. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Main Street as Lieutenant Commander Rita Rodriguez guided her car through the quiet streets of Millbrook, Georgia. Her navy blue uniform remained remarkably crisp despite the 6-hour drive from Naval Station Norfolk, a testament to the discipline that had been instilled in her since childhood. The small town's familiar sights brought back memories of summer visits to her grandmother's house, though this time her return was prompted by more urgent circumstances. Rita's fingers drummed lightly on the steering wheel as she passed the town square, its weathered gazebo standing sentinel among carefully tended flower beds. Her grandmother's recent fall had sent ripples of worry through the family, and Rita had immediately requested leave to help care for the woman who had been such a powerful influence in her life. The neon sign of May's Diner flickered invitingly, and Rita's stomach reminded her that she hadn't eaten since breakfast. She carefully parked her sedan in front of the small restaurant, its chrome trim reflecting the warm Georgia sunset. As she stepped out of the car, she automatically adjusted her uniform jacket and cap, movements ingrained through years of military service. The bell above the diner's door chimed as Rita entered, and several heads turned to observe the newcomer. She stood tall, her bearing reflecting her naval intelligence training, even as she felt the weight of curious stares. The familiar scent of coffee and fresh-baked pie filled the air, mixing with the subtle undertone of grilled onions and hamburgers. "Seat yourself, honey," called a waitress from behind the counter, her southern drawl thick and sweet as molasses. Rita chose a booth near the window, sliding onto the vinyl seat as she removed her cap and placed it beside her. The sleeve of her uniform rode up slightly, revealing the intricate tattoo on her forearm. The artwork was a masterpiece of meaning. Carefully designed maritime insignias flowed into elegant Spanish text, all woven together to honor her grandfather, Miguel Rodriguez, who had survived the attack on Pearl Harbor. The waitress approached, coffee pot in hand. "Coffee, sugar?" she asked, then paused, her eyes drawn to the tattoo. "My word, that's some beautiful artwork you've got there." Rita smiled warmly, unconsciously touching the inked skin. "Thank you. It's a tribute to my grandfather. He served at Pearl Harbor." "A hero, then," the waitress said with genuine respect, filling Rita's cup. "We don't get many naval officers through here. You visiting family?" "Yes, ma'am. My grandmother, Maria Rodriguez, she took a fall recently." "Oh, Maria, sweet lady, always bringing her homemade tamales to the church potluck. How is she doing?" Rita wrapped her hands around the warm coffee cup, drawing comfort from its familiar aroma. "She's stubborn as ever, insisting she's fine. But that's why I'm here, to help out for a while." The waitress, her name tag read Betty, had nodded sympathetically. "You're a good granddaughter. Now, what can I get you to eat?" After ordering a club sandwich, Rita gazed out the window at the passing traffic. Her grandfather's voice echoed in her memory, telling stories of service and sacrifice that had shaped her own path to the Navy. The tattoo had been her way of carrying those stories with her, a permanent reminder of the legacy she worked to uphold. The intricate design had taken hours to complete, each element carefully chosen. The anchor represented stability and hope, while the compass rose symbolized guidance through troubled waters. The Spanish text flowing elegantly between the maritime symbols read, "Honor, valor, familia," the values her grandfather had lived by and passed down to her. As Rita ate her sandwich, she observed the other diners with the subtle awareness that came from years of intelligence work. Most seemed absorbed in their own conversations, though she occasionally caught curious glances at her uniform. In a small southern town like Millbrook, a female Hispanic naval officer was bound to draw attention. The sun had nearly set when Rita finally stood to leave, placing a generous tip on the table. Betty hurried over with a piece of pie wrapped to go. "For Maria," she said with a warm smile. "Tell her we're all praying for a quick recovery." "Thank you, I will," Rita replied, touched by the gesture. She settled her cap back on her head and stepped out into the cooling evening air. As she walked to her car, Rita's thoughts turned to her grandmother and the challenges ahead. Maria Rodriguez had always been a force of nature, raising 3 children alone after her husband's passing, never losing her proud bearing or warm heart. Now, seeing her vulnerable for the first time, Rita felt a fierce protectiveness surge through her. The tattoo on her forearm seemed to tingle, as if her grandfather's spirit was reminding her of the strength that ran in their family's blood. She had faced down drug cartels during her undercover work, gathered intelligence in hostile territories, and never wavered from her duty. Taking care of her grandmother would be a different kind of mission, but one she would approach with the same dedication and honor that defined everything she did. The diner's peaceful atmosphere shattered when 2 police officers pushed through the entrance, the bell's cheerful chime contrasting with their aggressive demeanor. Deputy Chief Frank Coleman swaggered in first, his weathered face twisted in a perpetual sneer. Officer Wade Mitchell followed close behind, phone already in hand, as if expecting entertainment. Coleman's gaze locked onto Rita immediately, his eyes narrowing at the sight of her uniform. He nudged Mitchell, jerking his chin toward Rita's booth. "Well, what do we have here?" His voice carried deliberately across the diner, drawing uncomfortable attention from other patrons. Mitchell raised his phone, already recording as they approached Rita's table. She continued eating her sandwich, maintaining her composed demeanor despite their obvious hostile intent. Years of intelligence work had taught her to read situations quickly, and everything about these officers' body language spelled trouble. "That's some interesting gang ink you got there," Coleman said, looming over her table. He pointed at her forearm tattoo with his baton. "Didn't know the cartels were getting creative with their markings these days." Rita placed her sandwich down carefully, dabbing her mouth with a napkin before responding. "Good evening, officers. I believe there's been a misunderstanding. This is a military tribute tattoo." Mitchell snickered behind his phone. "Yeah, right. Let's see some ID, Chica." Without breaking eye contact with Coleman, Rita reached for her military identification, her movements deliberate and calm. She placed her naval intelligence credentials on the table. "Lieutenant Commander Rita Rodriguez, United States Navy." Coleman picked up the ID, making a show of examining it before laughing harshly. "This is a nice fake. Where'd you get it? Same place that does your gang tats?" "That is not a fake, Deputy Chief Coleman," Rita stated firmly, noting his nameplate. "It's my official military identification." "Listen here," Coleman growled, suddenly grabbing Rita's arm and yanking it roughly across the table. His fingers dug into her skin as he twisted her arm to expose the tattoo. "I know cartel trash when I see it. You people think you can just waltz in here with your fancy fake IDs and your gang signs." Mitchell zoomed in with his phone, capturing the moment. "This is going to get so many views," he said eagerly. "Another illegal trying to play dress-up in a uniform." The diner had gone silent. Betty stood frozen behind the counter, coffee pot trembling in her hand. Other customers stared down at their plates, unwilling to meet Rita's eyes. "I suggest you release my arm, Deputy Chief," Rita said quietly, her voice steady despite the growing pressure on her forearm. "The tattoo honors my grandfather, who survived Pearl Harbor. The Spanish text reads, 'Honor, Valor, Familia.'" Coleman tightened his grip. "Pearl Harbor? Right. And I'm the Queen of England." He turned to Mitchell, playing to the camera. "You hearing this? These illegals get more creative every day with their stories." "Total social media gold," Mitchell agreed, circling to get a better angle. "Wait till everyone sees this cartel princess pretending to be Navy." Rita remained still, her military training evident in her controlled response to their harassment. She didn't flinch or pull away, instead meeting Coleman's gaze with unwavering dignity. "My grandfather, Miguel Rodriguez, served on the USS California during the attack on Pearl Harbor. He earned the Navy Cross for his actions that day." "Sure he did," Coleman sneered, finally releasing her arm with a dismissive shove. "And I bet you've got a bridge to sell me too." He turned to the other diners, raising his voice. "This is what we're dealing with, folks. Criminals trying to hide behind fake military service makes me sick." Mitchell lowered his phone, grinning. "This is going viral for sure. Cartel princess busted playing Navy. That'll get some clicks." "I believe we're done here," Rita said calmly, reaching for her military ID. Coleman snatched it away before she could grasp it. "Oh no, we're keeping this little piece of evidence," he said, pocketing her ID. "Need to run some checks on it. Make sure it's not connected to any other fake documents floating around." "That's federal identification, Deputy Chief. You have no authority to confiscate it." Coleman leaned in close, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "Listen here, Princess. I don't care what kind of fake papers you've got. This is my town, and I don't take kindly to your type trying to dishonor our military with your little costume party." "Yeah," Mitchell chimed in, still filming. "Why don't you go back to wherever you came from? We don't need your kind here." Rita remained seated, her posture perfect, her expression neutral. She had faced down worse threats during her undercover work, and these small-town bullies, despite their badges, were nothing in comparison. Their racism and ignorance were evident in every word and gesture, but she maintained her composure, knowing that any reaction would only feed into their narrative. Coleman straightened up, adjusting his belt with exaggerated authority. "Consider this a warning. We'll be watching you." He turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and that uniform? It's a federal offense to impersonate military personnel. Think about that." The officers swaggered out of the diner. Mitchell still focused on his phone screen, already imagining the social media attention his video would receive. The bell chimed again as the door closed behind them, its cheerful sound now seeming oddly discordant in the tense atmosphere they left behind. The sun was setting when Coleman and Mitchell returned to the diner, this time with backup. 4 police cruisers surrounded the building, their lights painting the windows in alternating red and blue. Rita had just finished paying her bill when they burst through the door. "Hands where we can see them," Coleman shouted, drawing his weapon. "You're under arrest for impersonating military personnel and possession of fraudulent federal documents." Rita slowly raised her hands, keeping them visible as she'd been trained. Her mind shifted into operational mode, years of intelligence work taking over. Every detail mattered now. Their positions, their communications, their body language. "I am Lieutenant Commander Rita Rodriguez, United States Navy," she stated clearly, loud enough for the diner's patrons to hear. "This arrest is unlawful." Mitchell approached with handcuffs while Coleman kept his weapon trained on her. "Yeah? Tell it to the judge, Princess. Though I doubt you'll make it that far before immigration picks you up." The cold steel clicked around her wrists as Mitchell cuffed her, deliberately making them too tight. Rita didn't flinch. She'd endured worse during her 3 years undercover with the cartels. Instead, she focused on gathering intelligence just as she'd done countless times before. "Watch your head," Mitchell sneered, roughly pushing her toward the door. Rita allowed herself to be led out, maintaining her military bearing despite their attempts to humiliate her. The diner's customers watched in shocked silence as she was paraded past their tables. Outside, Coleman's radio crackled to life. Rita's trained ear caught the transmission despite their attempts to keep it quiet. "Chief, we need you at the usual spot," a voice said through static. "Got to make sure that shipment's protected tonight. Can't have any complications like last time." Coleman turned away, speaking in hushed tones. "Copy that. Just cleaning up a little situation here. I'll make sure our friend is secured and meet you there." Rita's pulse quickened, though her expression remained neutral. 3 years of infiltrating drug operations had taught her to recognize the signs. The casual mention of a shipment, the need for protection, the reference to previous complications. It all fit a pattern she knew too well. "Get in," Mitchell ordered, shoving her toward the nearest cruiser. Rita ducked her head, sliding into the back seat with practiced ease. Her mind was already cataloging details, building connections. This wasn't just small-town harassment anymore. She'd stumbled onto something much bigger. As they drove through the darkening streets, Rita recalled her last major operation. She'd spent 36 months deep undercover, working her way into one of the largest drug trafficking operations on the West Coast. That mission had earned her the Intelligence Medal and 3 commendations, though the citations remained classified. Coleman's cruiser pulled into the police station, a small brick building that had seen better days. Inside, they led her to a processing area that smelled of stale coffee and desperation. "Empty your pockets," Mitchell commanded, camera phone recording again. "Let's see what other fake IDs you're carrying." Rita complied silently, her movements precise despite the handcuffs. She'd been in far worse situations during her intelligence operations. The key was to remain calm, observe everything, and wait for the right moment. "Well, well," Coleman said, rifling through her wallet. "Look at this. Navy credit union card, military insurance card. You really went all out with this little charade, didn't you?" "Those are legitimate federal documents," Rita stated firmly. "You're interfering with a serving military officer." Mitchell laughed, zooming in on her face. "Still sticking to that story? Maybe a night in lockup will help you remember where you really came from." As they led her toward the holding cells, another radio transmission caught her attention. "Chief, that shipment's getting antsy. Need you here ASAP." Coleman cursed under his breath. "Book her quick," he told Mitchell. "We've got more important business tonight." Rita's intelligence training kicked into high gear. The urgency in the radio operator's voice, Coleman's reaction, the repeated mentions of a shipment, all pointed to something significant happening tonight. She'd heard similar communications during her cartel investigations, usually right before major drug movements. They pushed her into a holding cell, the door clanging shut with theatrical finality. "Enjoy your stay, Princess," Coleman called out. "Maybe immigration will be here by morning to sort you out." Rita sat on the hard bench, her posture perfect despite her exhaustion. She could hear them talking as they walked away, their voices carrying down the empty corridor. "You think she's really cartel?" Mitchell asked. "Don't matter what she is," Coleman replied. "By the time anyone figures it out, we'll have bigger things to worry about. Come on, we've got to secure that shipment before midnight." Their footsteps faded, leaving Rita alone in the cell. She closed her eyes, but her mind was racing. Years of intelligence work had taught her to recognize the signs of a major criminal operation. Whatever was happening tonight, it was big enough to make a corrupt deputy chief nervous. She'd come to town to visit her grandmother, but now she'd stumbled onto something that demanded her full professional attention. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Rita sat in the processing area, her wrists still bound in handcuffs that were definitely tighter than regulation. Officer Mitchell typed her information into an ancient computer system, deliberately misspelling her name despite her corrections. "That's Rodriguez with a Z at the end," Rita said calmly, maintaining her military bearing even while seated in the uncomfortable metal chair. "Whatever you say, Rodriguez," Mitchell smirked, emphasizing the incorrect spelling. He turned to Coleman, who was leaning against a filing cabinet. "Hey, Chief, you think we should run her prints through the cartel database first?" Rita observed their casual disregard for proper procedure, noting how neither officer had read her rights or properly documented her belongings. Her military intelligence training kicked in automatically. Every detail, every procedural violation, every casual comment became evidence to be cataloged and analyzed. Through the window of the booking area, she watched other officers moving through the station. Their behavior spoke volumes, the way they ignored obvious protocols, the casual mentions of packages and deliveries in their radio chatter, the knowing looks they exchanged when certain calls came in. "Got another delivery coming through Route 16, a voice crackled over the radio. "Need to make sure the road's clear around midnight." Coleman grabbed his radio. "Copy that, I'll have Baker and Martinez run interference." He didn't bother lowering his voice or moving away from Rita, displaying a confidence that came from years of operating without consequences. Rita kept her expression neutral, but her mind was racing. Route 16 was the main highway connecting to 3 state lines. The casual mention of running interference, combined with the earlier urgency about the shipment, painted a clear picture. This wasn't just about a few corrupt officers. This was an organized operation using police resources to facilitate drug trafficking. "Stand up," Mitchell ordered, grabbing her arm roughly for the fingerprinting process. "Let's see what your prints tell us about your military service." As Rita pressed each finger to the scanner, She noticed the stack of booking reports on the nearby desk. Multiple arrests, all with similar patterns. Hispanic names, missing documentation, quick releases with no formal charges. The systematic nature of the harassment wasn't just racism. It was a cover for something bigger. "Hey, Chief," an officer called from the doorway. "Martinez needs you to sign off on those special overtime hours from last week's highway patrol." The air quotes were practically visible in his tone. Coleman waved him off. Yeah, put it with the others. We'll process them all at once like usual." Rita's training helped her piece together the pattern. Fake overtime reports, coordinated highway patrols, regular shipments needing protection, all classic signs of a trafficking operation using police resources as cover. She'd seen similar setups during her cartel investigations, but never this deeply embedded in local law enforcement. "Looks like your prints aren't in our system," Mitchell announced, sounding disappointed. "But don't worry, we'll fix that tonight." A younger officer hurried into the booking area, his face flushed with urgency. "Chief, we've got a situation with tonight's delivery. Jackson's saying the package is larger than usual. We need extra units to secure the route." Coleman's face darkened. "Tell Jackson to hold position. I'll be there in 20. He turned to Mitchell. "Get her processed and in a cell. We've got more important things to handle tonight." Rita watched their interaction carefully. The younger officer's nervous energy, Coleman's immediate shift in priorities, the mention of a larger package, all indicators of a significant drug shipment. Her years of experience infiltrating cartels had taught her to recognize the signs of a major operation in progress. As Mitchell led her toward the cells, Rita passed the department's bulletin board. Among the wanted posters and shift schedules, she noticed a map marked with colored pins. To anyone else, it might look like routine patrol routes, but she recognized the pattern. Carefully coordinated coverage of major trafficking corridors. "Home sweet home," Mitchell sneered, pushing her into a cell. "Hope you're comfortable with small spaces." Rita sat on the metal bench, maintaining perfect posture despite her exhaustion. Through the cell bars, she could see officers gathering in the main area, speaking in hushed tones about route security and delivery timing. Years of undercover work had trained her to appear defeated while remaining hyper-aware of her surroundings. The evidence was overwhelming. The casual corruption, the coordinated operations, the systematic abuse of power, it all pointed to an entrenched criminal network using the police department as both cover and muscle for drug trafficking operations. What had started as simple harassment had led her to uncover something far more sinister. Rita closed her eyes, appearing to rest while her mind categorized and analyzed everything she'd observed. The department's corruption wasn't just about a few bad officers. It was an organized operation with established procedures, regular shipment schedules, and a hierarchy of involvement. Her apparent powerlessness as a harassment victim had given her unprecedented access to observe their operations from the inside. Through the thin walls, she could hear Coleman barking orders about securing routes and maintaining radio silence. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, revealing a picture that would shock even her experienced colleagues in naval intelligence. After 3 hours in the holding cell, Mitchell finally returned to escort Rita to make her phone call. He watched her with smug satisfaction, certain she would call some small-town lawyer who would be easily intimidated by the department's authority. "One call," he said, pushing the ancient desk phone toward her. "Make it count." Rita's fingers moved with practiced precision as she dialed a number she knew by heart. Her posture straightened instinctively as the call connected, years of military discipline taking over. "Admiral Brennan's office," a crisp voice answered. "This is Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez for Admiral Brennan. Authentication code Sierra 97 Delta 4. Mitchell's smirk faltered slightly at her formal tone. "One moment, Commander." The line clicked, and a deep, authoritative voice came through. "Rodriguez, report." "Sir, I've made contact with the local department, confirmation on all preliminary intel. The operation appears to be exactly as we suspected, possibly larger." Mitchell's face transformed from confusion to concern as he listened to Rita's side of the conversation. "Understood, Commander," Admiral Brennan replied. "What's your current situation?" "I'm in custody at the Millbrook Police Department. They've provided an excellent opportunity for close observation. I can confirm direct involvement of at least 12 officers, including the deputy chief. They're moving a major shipment tonight. Mitchell's hand moved toward his radio, but Rita's steady gaze stopped him. The power dynamic in the room had shifted dramatically. "Time frame?" the Admiral asked. "Midnight, sir. Route 16. They're deploying multiple units for coverage. The shipment is reportedly larger than their usual operation." "Well done, Commander. You've given us the final piece we needed. Teams are already in position across 3 states. We've been tracking this network for months, but the local police involvement was the missing link." Rita allowed herself a small smile as Mitchell's face drained of color. "Thank you, sir. I should mention that Officers Mitchell and Coleman have been particularly helpful in providing evidence. They've documented quite a bit of their behavior on video." Mitchell's hand dropped from his radio as he remembered the footage he'd gleefully recorded earlier, mocking her tattoo and military ID. The realization of what he'd done hit him like a physical blow. "Your grandmother?" Admiral Brennan asked, his tone softening slightly. "Actually in the hospital, sir, but stable. When the assignment came up in this region, I volunteered. Family visit provided perfect cover for the initial surveillance." "Good work, Commander. Stay in position. Extraction in 3 hours. I'll be there personally to oversee the operation." "Understood, sir." Rodriguez out. Rita placed the phone back in its cradle and turned to Mitchell, who stood frozen in place. The transformation was complete. Gone was any pretense of being a helpless victim. Her bearing was pure military intelligence officer, every inch the decorated commander she'd claimed to be. "Officer Mitchell," she said calmly, "I suggest you consider your next actions very carefully. Federal task force teams are already in position. At midnight, they'll be intercepting your department's shipment and arresting everyone involved in this trafficking operation." Mitchell's hand trembled as he reached for his radio again. "I wouldn't," Rita advised. "The department's communications are already being monitored. Any warning you send will only add to the evidence against you. And believe me, there's already plenty." She stood, her presence filling the small room despite her handcuffs. "That video you took earlier? The one where you and Coleman claimed my military ID was fake and mocked my grandfather's service tattoo? That's now evidence in a federal investigation of civil rights violations on top of the drug trafficking charges." Mitchell slumped against the wall, his earlier arrogance completely evaporated. How long?" "Naval intelligence has been tracking this operation for months," Rita explained. "Shipments moving through 3 states, always miraculously avoiding inspection. Local police departments providing protection and coverage. We just needed to confirm the direct involvement of officers and identify the key players." She glanced at her handcuffs. "Your department's enthusiasm for racial profiling made that part remarkably easy." The sound of approaching footsteps made Mitchell jump. Coleman appeared in the doorway, his face darkening at seeing Rita standing. "What's taking so long?" Coleman demanded. "Get her back in the cell. We need to prepare for tonight's operation." "Chief," Mitchell started, his voice shaking, "we have a problem." Rita turned to face Coleman, her military bearing even more pronounced. "Deputy Chief Coleman, I believe Admiral Brennan will want to discuss your department's unusual approach to highway patrol when he arrives. He's particularly interested in your creative overtime reporting." Coleman's face went through a rapid series of emotions: confusion, recognition, fear, and finally anger, as he realized how completely they'd been outmaneuvered by the woman they'd thought was just another victim of their harassment. The tables had turned. The small-town police station that had been the center of their corrupt operation was now the final piece of evidence in a federal investigation. And Rita Rodriguez, the naval intelligence officer they'd mistaken for an easy target, had been the key to bringing it all down. Admiral Thomas Brennan's office burst into controlled chaos within minutes of Rita's call. He stood at the center of the storm, issuing rapid-fire orders while maintaining the calm precision that had earned him his command. "I want surveillance teams in position within the hour," he commanded, addressing the assembled task force leaders. "Commander Rodriguez has given us exactly what we needed: confirmation of direct police involvement and the details of tonight's shipment." The Admiral's fingers traced the map spread across his desk, marking key positions. 3 months of tracking these shipments across state lines, and now we have the local corruption piece. Commander Rodriguez's position inside the station is invaluable. In the Millbrook Police Department holding cell, Rita sat quietly on the metal bench, maintaining her appearance of defeat. But her trained eyes caught every detail: the pattern of officer movements, the timing of shift changes, the casual conversations that revealed the depth of the corruption. Her military intelligence training had taught her to turn every moment of captivity into an opportunity for gathering information. Through the cell's bars, she watched as Mitchell and Coleman huddled in worried conversation, their earlier confidence shattered. Their own body cameras continued to record, capturing every nervous exchange about the upcoming midnight operation. Rita allowed herself a small smile, knowing that every word they spoke added to the federal case building against them. Back at the command center, Admiral Brennan reviewed the social media videos Mitchell had posted earlier that day. The officer's sneering face filled the screen as he mocked Rita's military ID and her grandfather's memorial tattoo. Perfect evidence of civil rights violations, Brennan noted grimly. Their own arrogance did half our work for us. The task force teams moved with practiced efficiency, setting up surveillance positions around Route 16 where the shipment would pass. Unmarked vehicles took up strategic locations, while communications specialists monitored the police department's radio traffic. Every casual reference to the shipment and coverage added another layer to the evidence. Inside the station, Rita continued her careful observation. When Officer Mitchell brought her dinner, a stale sandwich that showed their continued disrespect, she maintained her role as the intimidated victim. But her keen eyes noted the locations of security cameras, the patterns of access to secure areas, and the subtle signs of which officers were directly involved in the corruption. "Federal teams are in position, sir," reported Agent Sarah Chen, one of Brennan's key tactical leaders. "We have coverage of all potential routes and full surveillance of the police department. Commander Rodriguez's presence inside has given us unprecedented access to their operations." Brennan nodded, studying the real-time updates flowing into the command center. Commander Rodriguez's arrest couldn't have worked out better if we'd planned it. Their own bigotry led them to target her, giving us the perfect opportunity to document their corruption from the inside. The afternoon wore on as the task force prepared for the midnight operation. Rita used every opportunity to gather intelligence. When taken to the restroom, she noted which doors required key card access. During a shift change, she observed the handoff protocols, or lack thereof, that allowed the corruption to flourish. Mitchell's phone continued to betray him. His earlier social media posts about arresting a fake military officer spread rapidly online, drawing attention he no longer wanted. Each mocking comment and shared video strengthened the federal case, documenting the department's pattern of discrimination and abuse of power. "Sir," Agent Chen reported, "we've intercepted communications confirming the midnight shipment. Multiple department units will be providing escort and coverage. Commander Rodriguez's intelligence is solid." Admiral Brennan studied the tactical display, watching the pieces fall into place. The commander's position inside the station is crucial. While they think they have her contained, she's actually coordinating our entire surveillance operation. When this breaks open, they'll realize she was never their prisoner. She was our operative gathering evidence from the inside. In her cell, Rita maintained her careful act of submission, but her military training kept her alert to every detail. She noted which officers appeared nervous about the upcoming operation, which ones checked their phones repeatedly, and which ones seemed oblivious, helping to identify everyone involved in the corruption. The task force teams continued their preparations, positioning assets with tactical precision. Surveillance equipment monitored every approach to Route 16, while communications experts recorded every radio transmission from the police department. The evidence mounted steadily, building an airtight federal case. Commander Rodriguez's intelligence background made her perfect for this, Brennan explained to his team. 3 years of undercover work infiltrating drug cartels gave her exactly the skills needed to gather evidence while appearing to be just another victim of police harassment. The afternoon stretched into evening, and Rita's role shifted from victim to active intelligence operative. Every moment in custody provided another opportunity to document the department's corruption. The officers' own technology, their body cameras, security systems, and social media posts became weapons against them, recording evidence of their crimes even as they thought they were in control. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows through the police station windows as Admiral Thomas Brennan strode through the front doors, his commanding presence immediately shifting the atmosphere in the room. His naval dress uniform, adorned with decades of service medals, created a stark contrast to the casual demeanor of the local officers. Behind him, a team of federal agents moved with practiced precision, their badges gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Officer Mitchell, who had been lounging at the front desk scrolling through his phone, jumped to his feet. The sudden appearance of federal authority stripped away his earlier cockiness. Other officers scattered like startled birds, their usual swagger replaced by uncertain glances. Chief Coleman emerged from his office, his face twisted in a mixture of annoyance and confusion at the unexpected arrival of federal personnel. He approached Admiral Brennan with the smug confidence of someone who believed his local authority couldn't be challenged. "This is a local matter," Coleman declared, puffing out his chest. "We don't need any federal interference in our jurisdiction." His hand rested casually on his belt, near his badge, a gesture meant to emphasize his authority. Admiral Brennan fixed Coleman with a steady gaze that had made far more important men uncomfortable. "I'm here to see Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez," he stated, his voice carrying the weight of decades of command. Coleman's smugness increased. "That woman claiming to be military personnel? She's in custody for presenting false identification." He gestured dismissively toward the holding cells. "We've dealt with these types before." Without acknowledging Coleman's response, Admiral Brennan walked purposefully toward the holding area, his polished shoes clicking against the linoleum floor. The federal agents spread out through the station with quiet efficiency, taking up strategic positions. Rita stood as Admiral Brennan approached her cell, her military bearing evident despite hours in custody. Her naval uniform, though wrinkled from confinement, still spoke of her true authority and position. Admiral Brennan came to attention and delivered a crisp salute. "Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez, thank you for your service and your sacrifice." His voice carried through the station, ensuring everyone heard the formal acknowledgement of her rank and position. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The color drained from Coleman's face as the full impact of his mistake crashed over him. His mouth opened and closed without forming words, his earlier arrogance evaporating like morning dew under a harsh sun. Officer Mitchell, who had followed the group to the holding area, nearly dropped his phone. The same device he had used to mock and humiliate Rita now contained evidence of his own misconduct. His hands trembled as he realized the videos he had posted would now serve as evidence against him. "Sir," Rita returned the salute with perfect military precision. "Thank you for your prompt response to my situation." Her calm professionalism stood in sharp contrast to the growing panic among the local officers. Coleman found his voice, though it quavered with uncertainty. This has to be some kind of mistake. We had reports of suspicious activity." "The only suspicious activity here," Admiral Brennan cut him off, "has been the systematic abuse of power by your department." He turned to one of the federal agents. "Release Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez immediately." As the cell door opened, other officers began backing away, their earlier bravado replaced by the dawning realization of their vulnerability. The federal agents maintained their positions, their presence a reminder that the local power structure had just been completely upended. Rita stepped out of the cell with dignity, her military bearing unchanged by the hours of confinement. She stood beside Admiral Brennan, and the contrast between her professional demeanor and Coleman's crumbling composure couldn't have been more stark. "Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez," Admiral Brennan announced loud enough for everyone to hear, "has been instrumental in a federal investigation into corruption and drug trafficking. Her presence here, while unplanned, has provided valuable intelligence about local law enforcement involvement in these operations." Coleman's face, already pale, turned almost gray. His hand dropped from his belt as the full implications of his actions began to sink in. The racist harassment of a naval officer, captured on video and shared on social media, was just the beginning of his problems. "I suggest," Admiral Brennan continued, his voice carrying the full weight of federal authority, that everyone involved in tonight's planned operation reconsider their activities very carefully. His gaze swept the room, meeting the eyes of officers who suddenly found great interest in studying the floor. Rita stood at parade rest, her composure unbroken, as Coleman's world continued to crumble around him. The memorial tattoo on her forearm, which the local officers had mockingly dismissed as a gang symbol, now stood as a visible reminder of their catastrophic misjudgment. The afternoon sun continued its slow descent, casting longer shadows through the station windows, as federal agents began the systematic process of securing the building and its records. The local officers, their authority stripped away, could only watch as their carefully constructed world of corruption began to unravel. The next hour transformed the sleepy police station into the epicenter of a massive federal operation. Teams of agents methodically moved through the building, securing evidence and detaining officers. The quiet shuffle of papers and clicking of handcuffs replaced the usual casual chatter and radio static. Rita stood beside Admiral Brennan in what had been Chief Coleman's office, now serving as a temporary command center. She watched through the window as federal vehicles surrounded the building, their lights painting the street in alternating red and blue. 17 corrupt officers, Rita said, reviewing the data on her tablet. All of them involved in facilitating drug shipments through the port. Her finger traced a complex network diagram showing connections between the department and known cartel operatives. Admiral Brennan nodded grimly. "Your intelligence gathering was exceptional, Lieutenant Commander. Those body camera recordings and social media posts gave us everything we needed." He gestured to a stack of evidence bags containing confiscated phones. Their own bigotry became their undoing. Outside the office, agents led a steady stream of handcuffed officers toward waiting transport vehicles. Officer Mitchell walked past, his head bowed, the phone he had used to mock Rita now sealed in an evidence bag. Chief Coleman followed shortly after, his face a mask of defeated rage. "The cartel connection runs deeper than we initially suspected," Rita continued, pulling up satellite imagery of the port. "This department wasn't just turning a blind eye. They were actively managing the operation. Those radio calls about protecting shipments weren't just code. They were coordinating directly with cartel members." As if on cue, several black SUVs pulled into the parking lot. Agents emerged escorting 5 men in expensive suits, the cartel's local business representatives, arrested at a warehouse near the port. Their carefully maintained facade of legitimacy had crumbled when faced with the evidence Rita had gathered. 3 states, Admiral Brennan mused, studying the network diagram. Georgia, South Carolina, and Florida, all connected through this one small-town department. He shook his head in disbelief. They thought they were invisible, hiding behind badges and small-town politics. The evidence wall behind them told the story in detail. Photos showed police vehicles escorting unmarked trucks through security checkpoints. Financial records revealed a complex web of payments disguised as legitimate business transactions. Body camera footage, ironically recorded by the corrupt officers themselves, documented countless instances of them facilitating drug shipments. They never suspected, Rita observed, that their racist harassment would help bring them down. She touched her forearm tattoo, the maritime insignia and Spanish text that had so offended the local officers. Every time they mocked this or called me cartel trash, they were recording evidence of their own prejudice and corruption. A senior federal agent entered the office carrying a thick folder. "Lieutenant Commander, the preliminary numbers are staggering. We've seized over 2,000 kilograms of cocaine, 1,000 kilograms of methamphetamine, and enough fentanyl to devastate multiple cities." He placed the folder on the desk. "The street value exceeds $50 million. The scope of the operation continued to unfold as more reports came in. Federal teams had simultaneously raided connected locations across 3 states, acting on intelligence Rita had helped compile. Storage facilities, front businesses, and corrupt officials were all being taken down in a coordinated sweep. "The port was key," Rita explained, pointing to shipping manifests. "They used legitimate cargo containers to smuggle drugs, with the police department managing local distribution and providing protection." She highlighted several routes on the map. The corruption here made the entire operation possible. Outside, more federal vehicles arrived, bringing additional agents to process the growing mountain of evidence. The local officers' computers were being seized, their emails and communications revealing years of coordinated criminal activity. The social media evidence is particularly damning, another agent reported, displaying Mitchell's posted videos on a laptop. They documented their own racist behavior, thinking it would humiliate you, Lieutenant Commander. Instead, it gave us probable cause for deeper investigation. The videos played silently on the screen, Mitchell and Coleman mocking Rita's military ID, making racist comments about her tattoo, roughly handling her during the arrest. Each clip now served as evidence of their corruption and abuse of power. 17 officers, 12 cartel members, and 28 associated civilians, Admiral Brennan read from an updated report. All part of a network that's been operating for at least 5 years. He turned to Rita. Your grandmother would be proud, and your grandfather's memory has been well served. Rita nodded, touching her tattoo once more. The maritime insignia that honored her grandfather's Pearl Harbor service had helped expose a criminal enterprise he would have despised. The Spanish text, celebrating family and duty, stood as a testament to the values that had brought this corruption to light. The day continued into evening as federal agents processed arrests and secured evidence. The small-town police station, once a hub of corruption, had become the center of its own undoing. The racist officers who had delighted in harassing a naval intelligence officer now faced federal charges, their own recordings and social media posts ensuring their conviction. Through it all, Rita maintained her professional composure, coordinating with federal agents and providing crucial intelligence. The operation she had stumbled into had become one of the largest drug trafficking busts in the state's history, all because some corrupt officers couldn't see past their own prejudices to recognize the highly trained federal operative in their midst. The federal operation was proceeding smoothly when everything suddenly erupted into chaos. Chief Coleman, who had been sitting quietly in handcuffs near the dispatch desk, caught everyone off guard. In one fluid motion, he yanked his hands free from the loosened restraints and lunged toward a rookie officer who had left his weapon unsecured on the desk. Rita noticed the movement first. Her intelligence training had taught her to constantly scan for threats, and Coleman's subtle shift in posture triggered immediate alarm bells. "Gun!" she shouted, already moving to protect the nearest agents. Coleman snatched the weapon and spun around, his face contorted with desperate rage. The other detained officers scattered, pressing themselves against the walls as federal agents drew their weapons. But Coleman wasn't interested in them. His eyes locked onto Rita with predatory focus. "You ruined everything," he snarled, leveling the gun at her chest. "All these years building this operation, and some tattooed Navy brat thinks she can tear it all down?" Rita maintained her combat stance, her military training taking over. She noted every detail, his unstable grip on the weapon, his unbalanced stance, the wild look in his eyes that suggested he wasn't thinking clearly. The surveillance cameras in the corner continued recording, capturing every second of Coleman's breakdown. "It's over, Coleman," Rita said calmly, her hands raised but her body coiled and ready. "Don't make this worse than it already is." Admiral Brennan and the federal agents had their weapons trained on Coleman, but the former police chief was using Rita as a shield, making any clean shot impossible. The tension in the room crackled like electricity. "Worse?" Coleman laughed, a harsh, broken sound. "I built this department. I controlled every shipment through that port. I decided who lived and who died in this town." His finger tightened on the trigger. "And I'm not letting some minority take that away from me." The racial slur had barely left his lips when he fired. Rita was already moving, her combat training executing a perfect evasive maneuver. But even her quick reflexes couldn't completely dodge the bullet. It tore through her uniform sleeve, leaving a burning graze across her shoulder. The pain was sharp but manageable. Rita used Coleman's moment of surprise to close the distance. Before he could fire again, she executed a disarming technique she had practiced countless times in training. Her hand struck his wrist while her body pivoted, using his own momentum against him. The gun clattered to the floor as Coleman stumbled forward. But the former chief wasn't finished. He charged at Rita like a wounded bull, all technique abandoned in favor of raw fury. Rita sidestepped his rush, using his momentum to flip him onto his back. The impact knocked the wind from his lungs, and before he could recover, she had him pinned in a secure hold. Federal agents swarmed in, securing Coleman with multiple sets of handcuffs this time. The surveillance cameras had captured everything: his escape attempt, the racial slur, the shot fired at a federal officer. All of it providing irrefutable evidence of the department's violent desperation to protect their criminal enterprise. "Lieutenant Commander, you're bleeding," Admiral Brennan said, rushing to check her wound. The bullet had left an angry graze across her shoulder, tearing through her uniform, but fortunately causing no serious damage. Medical personnel quickly attended to Rita's injury while Coleman was led away, still struggling and shouting threats. The other detained officers looked on in shock, any remaining loyalty to their former chief shattered by his violent outburst. "Get that surveillance footage secured immediately," Rita ordered, wincing slightly as the medic cleaned her wound. "Every second of that confrontation needs to be preserved as evidence." The federal agents were already on it, downloading the security camera feeds and securing the weapon Coleman had used. The scene played out on their monitors: the escape attempt, the shot fired, Rita's skilled defensive maneuver, all captured in high-definition detail that would leave no room for doubt in court. "Are you all right?" Admiral Brennan asked, his concern evident as the medic applied a bandage to Rita's shoulder. "I'm fine, sir," Rita assured him, her military bearing unchanged despite the close call. "This just adds attempted murder of a federal officer to his charges." She glanced at the security footage still playing on the monitors, and proves exactly how far they were willing to go to protect their operation. The evidence was damning. Coleman's violent outburst, caught on camera from multiple angles, demonstrated the department's readiness to use lethal force to maintain their criminal enterprise. His racist comments and attempted murder of a naval intelligence officer would ensure maximum penalties when the case went to court. As federal agents continued processing the scene, Rita stood watching the footage of her confrontation with Coleman. Her combat training had saved her life, just as her intelligence training had helped expose the corruption. The security cameras had captured every second, providing the final, irrefutable proof of how deep the corruption ran in this small-town department. The emergency room doctor finished applying the final bandage to Rita's shoulder, securing the white gauze with medical tape. "You're lucky, Lieutenant Commander. A few inches to the left and we'd be having a very different conversation." Rita nodded, rolling her shoulder carefully to test its mobility. The local anesthetic dulled the pain, but she could still feel the tightness of the damaged tissue underneath. In the treatment room's small television, news helicopters circled above the police station, their cameras capturing the ongoing federal operation that had transformed this quiet town into the center of a major drug bust. Special Agent Marcus Chen entered, tablet in hand, his FBI windbreaker still dusty from the raid. "The numbers are coming in, Commander. You're going to want to hear this." He pulled up a chair beside her treatment bed. The warehouse sweep turned up $325 million worth of cocaine, all carefully hidden behind legitimate shipping containers. We've got shipping manifests dating back 5 years. "The cartel connection?" Rita asked, accepting the fresh uniform shirt a nurse brought in to replace her blood-stained one. "Better than we hoped," Chen replied, swiping through documents on his tablet. "Coleman's phone is already giving up secrets. We've identified direct links to 7 major cartel figures operating in 3 states. 4 are already in custody, and we have tactical teams moving on the others right now." Admiral Brennan joined them, his presence drawing immediate attention from the medical staff. "The corruption network went deeper than anyone suspected," he said, handing Rita a secure phone. 17 dirty cops were just the tip of the iceberg. We've got port authorities, customs officials, even 2 state judges implicated in the evidence we seized. Rita reviewed the preliminary reports while a nurse checked her vital signs. The operation had exposed a criminal enterprise that had operated with impunity for years, using this small Georgia town as a major distribution hub for the entire southeastern United States. The corrupt police department had provided protection, ensuring shipments moved smoothly while targeting any potential threats to their operation. "The body camera footage and social media posts are particularly damning," Chen continued. "Officer Mitchell's habit of filming his harassment of minorities gave us a detailed record of their racial profiling system. They specifically targeted people they thought wouldn't be believed if they reported suspicious activity around the port. Their own bigotry became their undoing, Admiral Brennan noted, his voice carrying a hint of satisfaction. They were so convinced you were just another victim, they never considered you might be a federal officer gathering evidence. The doctor returned with discharge papers as more reports flooded in. The FBI had seized computers, phones, and documents that outlined the entire criminal network. Bank records revealed millions in bribes and payoffs. The corruption had touched every level of local government, but the evidence trail was clear and undeniable. "What about the port?" Rita asked, signing her discharge forms. Her shoulder protested as she moved, but she pushed through the discomfort. "Completely shut down for now," Chen replied. "Federal authorities are conducting a thorough inspection of every container, every facility. We're finding hidden compartments, secret storage areas. They'd turned the entire port into their personal smuggling operation." A television news report caught their attention. Footage showed federal agents leading Coleman and the other arrested officers through a gauntlet of reporters. The former police chief's face was a mask of rage as journalists shouted questions about corruption and drug trafficking. Behind them, other agents wheeled out cart after cart of evidence boxes. "The U.S. Attorney's Office is already preparing indictments," Admiral Brennan said. "Between the surveillance footage, financial records, and seized drugs, they're looking at multiple life sentences. The racial component of their profiling system will add hate crime enhancements to the charges." Rita watched the news coverage, seeing the full impact of their operation unfold. Local residents were being interviewed, many sharing stories of harassment and intimidation they'd suffered under Coleman's corrupt department. The truth was finally coming to light, and with it the beginning of healing for the community. "We've also identified all their cartel contacts in Mexico," Chen added, showing Rita another report. "Our counterparts south of the border are moving on their locations now. This operation didn't just shut down a local corruption ring, it's dismantling an entire international drug trafficking network." The scope of their success was still growing. What had started as an investigation into port corruption had exposed a criminal enterprise worth hundreds of millions of dollars. The evidence they'd gathered would lead to dozens of arrests across multiple jurisdictions, effectively crippling one of the largest drug trafficking operations on the East Coast. "You did outstanding work, Lieutenant Commander," Admiral Brennan said, his pride evident. "Your ability to maintain your cover even while being harassed and arrested gave us exactly what we needed to bring down this entire network." Rita nodded, but her thoughts drifted to her grandmother waiting at home. The professional mission was complete, but her personal journey, the real reason she'd volunteered for this assignment, was still unfinished. There would be debriefings and testimony to come, but first she had a promise to keep to her family. Rita stood at her grandmother's front door, her arm in a sling, taking a deep breath before knocking. The familiar scent of her abuela's gardenias filled the air as the door opened, revealing Elena Rodriguez, her silver hair neatly styled despite her illness. "Mi pequeña," Elena susurró. Sus ojos inmediatamente fueron al hombro herido de Rita. She reached out with trembling hands, touching Rita's cheek. "I saw everything on the news." Rita followed her grandmother into the house, the same home where she'd spent countless summers as a child. Family photos lined the walls, her grandfather in his Navy uniform at Pearl Harbor, Rita at her Naval Academy graduation, and dozens of moments in between. "I'm sorry I couldn't come sooner, Abuela," Rita said, helping her grandmother settle into her favorite armchair. "The operation dash." Elena waved her hand dismissively. "Did you think I didn't know?" A grandmother always knows. She reached for a manila envelope on the side table. "Every time you called, telling me you were working at a desk job, I knew better." She pulled out newspaper clippings, coverage of cartel arrests, drug busts, federal operations. In each one, there was no mention of Rita, but Elena had circled small details, patterns that only a loving grandmother would notice. "How long have you known?" Rita asked, touched by her grandmother's quiet understanding. "Since your first undercover assignment," Elena smiled. "You have your grandfather's eyes when you're protecting people. That same fire." She took Rita's hand. "I've been proud of you every single day, mi amor. Scared for you, yes, but so very proud." A knock at the door interrupted their moment. Rita opened it to find a tall man in his early 30s, holding a stack of papers. "Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez," he said. "I'm Diego Morales. I teach at the local high school. I was there when they arrested you at the diner." He shifted uncomfortably. "I'm testifying tomorrow about the department's harassment patterns. I wanted to thank you personally for what you did for our community." Rita invited him in, and Diego shared his story with them. He'd documented years of police harassment against immigrant families, watching helplessly as Coleman's department terrorized vulnerable community members. His students' parents lived in constant fear, afraid to report crimes or seek help from authorities. "Things are already changing," Diego explained, spreading out letters on Elena's coffee table. "These are from families who've lived in fear for years. They're finally coming forward, telling their stories. The interim police chief is setting up a community oversight board, making sure nothing like this ever happens again." Elena listened intently, occasionally squeezing Rita's hand. "Your grandfather would be so proud," she whispered. "He always said that wearing the uniform meant protecting everyone, not just those who look like you." Diego shared more stories of transformation. The port, once a source of terror for immigrant workers, was being reformed under new management. Federal authorities had implemented strict oversight, ensuring fair treatment and safe working conditions. Families that had lived in the shadows were emerging, finding their voices in community meetings and local government. "Your arrest video went viral," Diego said, "but not how Coleman intended. When people saw how they treated a decorated naval officer because of her heritage, it opened their eyes. The racism wasn't hidden anymore, they couldn't deny it." Rita learned how her apparent victimization had become a catalyst for change. Immigrant families, inspired by her example, were reporting years of abuse and discrimination. The federal investigation had exposed not just criminal corruption, but a deep-rooted system of racial prejudice that had poisoned the community for generations. "My students are talking about joining law enforcement now," Diego continued, his eyes bright with hope. "They want to be part of the change. They saw you stand there, dignified in your uniform, refusing to let them shame you. You showed them that the badge should stand for protection, not persecution." Elena reached for a photo album, showing Diego pictures of Rita's grandfather. "My husband survived Pearl Harbor to make sure his children and grandchildren could live in a better America," she said. "Rita carries on his fight, protecting the dream he defended." The afternoon sun filtered through Elena's lace curtains as they talked, sharing stories of the community's awakening. Diego spoke of healing initiatives, of new partnerships between law enforcement and immigrant advocacy groups. The corrupt system that had allowed Coleman's department to terrorize vulnerable families was being dismantled, piece by piece. "We're creating a scholarship," Diego revealed. "The Pearl Harbor Legacy Scholarship, named after your grandfather. It will help children from immigrant families pursue careers in public service, law enforcement, military, community leadership." Rita felt tears in her eyes as her grandmother squeezed her hand again. The pain in her shoulder seemed distant now, overshadowed by the impact of their operation. What had begun as a drug trafficking investigation had evolved into something more profound, a transformation that would protect families for generations to come. "Your grandfather always said that true courage isn't about fighting battles," Elena said softly, touching the maritime insignia tattooed on Rita's arm. "It's about standing firm in your truth, protecting those who cannot protect themselves. You've done that, mi pequeña, you've done that and more." 3 months later, Rita stood before a packed auditorium at the Naval Intelligence Headquarters in Washington, District of Columbia. Her dress whites gleamed under the lights, her grandmother Elena beaming proudly from the front row. Next to Elena sat Diego, looking handsome in his dark suit, his eyes never leaving Rita as Admiral Brennan approached the podium. "Lieutenant Commander Rita Rodriguez exemplifies the highest traditions of naval service," Admiral Brennan's voice carried through the hall. "Her actions led to the dismantling of a multi-state criminal enterprise, the seizure of $23 million in illegal substances, and the arrest of 32 cartel operatives." Rita's gaze drifted to her grandmother, who had made a remarkable recovery since the operation. The stress of living in a corrupt community had taken its toll on Elena's health, but as the town transformed, so did her spirit. Weekly community meetings now took place in her garden, where she served her famous empanadas to families who once lived in fear, but now spoke freely of their hopes for the future. Beyond the operational success, Admiral Brennan continued, Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez's actions catalyzed profound social change. Her dignity under harassment exposed systemic discrimination and led to comprehensive reforms in law enforcement practices across 3 states. Diego caught Rita's eye and smiled. Their relationship had blossomed unexpectedly during the aftermath of the operation. His testimony about years of police harassment had proved crucial in securing convictions, but it was his dedication to community healing that had captured Rita's heart. Together, they had worked to establish trust between law enforcement and immigrant families, turning pain into progress. For exceptional service, unwavering courage, and dedication to the highest principles of justice, Admiral Brennan announced, I present Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez with the Defense Distinguished Service Medal. As the Admiral pinned the medal to her uniform, Rita thought about her grandfather's Pearl Harbor story, how one person's courage could ripple through generations. The intricate tattoo on her forearm, once mocked by corrupt officers, now stood as a symbol of pride and protection in her community. After the ceremony, Elena embraced her granddaughter tightly. Your abuelo is watching, she whispered, her eyes glistening. He sees how you've protected his dream. Diego approached them carrying a bouquet of gardenias, Elena's favorite flowers. The Community Oversight Board approved all our recommendations, he said, taking Rita's hand. The new police chief is implementing cultural sensitivity training, and 5 of my students have applied to the Naval Academy. Rita squeezed his hand, feeling the warmth of both professional and personal fulfillment. The operation that began with confronting bigotry had evolved into a love story, not just between her and Diego, but between a community and its renewed sense of safety and dignity. We're having a celebration dinner at my house, Elena announced, her eyes twinkling. All the families want to thank their protector. She patted Diego's arm. And welcome their new teacher properly into the family. As they left the auditorium together, Rita realized that her grandfather's legacy had come full circle. The tattoo that honored his sacrifice now symbolized her own commitment to service, justice, and love. In finding her voice against corruption, she had helped others find theirs. In protecting her community, she had found her heart's home. The evening sun painted the sky in warm colors as they drove to Elena's house, where the aroma of traditional cooking and the sound of families gathering promised a future filled with hope, healing, and happiness. If this story made you pause, reflect, or even smile, don't forget to subscribe. I post daily, and the next story might be exactly what you need to hear.